And former IEC Commissioner, now Chair of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa, IEMSA, Tselane, joins us now. Very good evening to you, Mr. Tselane. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us this Saturday. As we mentioned, this is a role you're very familiar with, and now you on the outside looking in. Do you share the excitement that many, not only observers, but those who are participating, projecting, particularly because of what they see as the watershed moment that these elections will be?
Good evening to you and to your viewers, and thank you very much for having me. Of course, the 2024 elections are important in many respects. It is 30 years since the advent of our democracy, and there are quite a number of developments that have happened since then. But one of those is that for the first time in these elections, we'll be seeing those individuals who will be contesting other than through membership of a political party. So that is significant. But it's also significant that the numbers have increased slightly, and then we will see how things go going forward.
I'd like to pick up, and this might be starting off at the tail end, but it's something that is often echoed by some quarters during elections, ahead of elections and the run-up of elections. You would hear people say the governing party is fixing the elections. Just how easy or difficult is it to meddle with elections, the system, you having been in the thick of it? Let's lay that to rest.
Well, it is very difficult to have a very coordinated project on having a fraudulent election. But nevertheless, there are checks and balances that have been put in place to make sure that any malfeasance that happens in the electoral process is detected at an earliest possible time. Firstly, through the fact that the elections are announced at the voting station where voting took place. So you don't have a situation where the ballot papers are taken from a voting station to another area that is going to be regarded as a vote or as a counting center. So the voting station gets converted into a counting center with the observers there, with the party agents being present, and everybody being able to see everything that happens at the voting station. But apart from that, after voting, there is a result slip that gets signed by the party agents as well as the presiding officer, and the same result slip is pasted at outside the voting station, so that every person who comes there can be able to see the outcome of the results of the elections at that station. And then the second thing is that the same result slip is then captured into the system, and a person can actually be able to see that the result that is captured is similar to the information that is captured in the result slip. So they are really a transparent mechanism through which one can be able to follow the electoral process and the results thereof.
Now, the registration period underway. For now, this is the final registration period until the election results or election date is announced. You've heard the official opposition calling on the president to announce the results. If you can talk about, please, the importance of that. How soon is too soon, or can it ever be too late to announce an election date when we talk about foundational democracy at its healthiest?
Well, the elections have got to take place within 90 days after the date of the last elections. The last elections were on the 8th of May, and therefore it means the elections have got to take place from the 8th of May to the 4th of August. And it is important, of course, for the president to make an announcement. And what has traditionally happened is that when we go to the second registration weekend, the president would have announced the date of the elections so that, it is used basically to get as many people as possible to participate in the electoral process. But here is a difficulty. And then I appreciate the kind of the dilemma that the president finds himself in. As you may be aware, just yesterday, Parliament was still having public forums where they are looking at the Electoral Amendment Act. So it means, even though we are going into the elections, the framework within which the elections are going to be taking place have not as yet been finalized because the Electoral Amendment Bill is still out there. So if the president announces the date and it's the earliest possible date, and then we find that the kind of logistical arrangement that have got to be entered into require more time, it might put both the commission and the announcement in a very difficult situation. So the president would probably want to see a situation where that bill has been signed before he announces the date of the elections. And as I've suggested, the elections have got to take place within 90 days after the date of the last elections in terms of Section 49 of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Universal suffrage is something that South Africa has always strived for and is seen as a triumph, as you mentioned, the 30-year mark of democracy this year. Opposition parties scathing about the fact that of the number of eligible voters, only 27 million are on the voters' roll. Is that blame that can be laid at the feet of the governing party or the IEC, or could it simply be an expression of, on one hand, disenchantment or lack of civic education about the importance of voter registration and ultimately voting?
The electoral process is a joint responsibility. It's a joint responsibility between the Electoral Commission, political parties, civil society organizations. And then I think all those structures have got a responsibility in terms of mobilizing and inciting people to participate in the electoral process. So if you have a low voter turnout, we cannot just blame one entity, such as the Commission. It means we've got to really look at the strategies that are used by political parties to mobilize people to participate in the process, but also look at the civil society organizations, whether they're doing enough. And I think thus far, it is clear to everyone that not a lot has actually been done to educate people about the electoral process, particularly since the advent of independence in the electoral process. And I think we should have made voter education a priority so that people understand exactly what the legal framework within which the elections are going to take place is going to look like. But the fact that we're still busy now, as we're sitting here, with the last registration weekend, still dealing with electoral amendment bill, shows that there are definitely serious difficulties and challenges ahead of the 2024 elections.
Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure the conversations with you will continue. Mr. Tselane, who is the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa chairperson, and of course also former IEC Commissioner.